Sometimes he thought of Fix, but no longer in anger. Fix, like all the world, had been mistaken in Phileas Fogg, and had only done his duty in tracking and arresting him, while he, Passepartout. This thought haunted him, and he never ceased cursing his miserable folly. Finding himself too wretched to remain alone, he knocked at Aouda's door, went into her room, and seated himself, without speaking, in a corner, and looked ruefully at the young woman. Aouda was still pensive. About 7:30 in the evening, Mr. Fogg sent to know if Aouda would receive him, and in a few minutes he found himself alone with her. Phileas Fogg took a chair and sat down near the fireplace, opposite Aouda. No emotion was visible on his face. Fogg returned was exactly the Fogg who had gone away. There was the same calm, the same impassibility. He sat several minutes without speaking. Then, bending his eyes on Aouda, Madame, said he, will you pardon me for bringing you to England? Ay, Mr. Fogg, replied Aouda, checking the pulsations of her heart. Please let me finish, returned Mr. Fogg. When I decided to bring you far away from the country, which was so unsafe for you, I was rich, and counted on putting a portion of my fortune at your disposal. Then your existence would have been free and happy, but now I am ruined. I know it, Mr. Fogg, replied Aouda, and I ask you, in my turn, will you forgive me for having followed you, and, who knows, having perhaps delayed you, and thus contributed to your ruin? Madam, you could not remain in India, and your safety could only be assured by bringing you to such a distance that your persecutors could not take you. So, Mr. Fogg, resumed Aouda, not content with rescuing me from a terrible death, you thought yourself bound to secure my comfort in a foreign land? Yes, madam, but circumstances have been against me. Still, I beg to place the little I have left at your service. And what will become of you, Mr. Fogg? As for me, madam, replied the gentleman coldly, I have need of nothing. And how do you look upon the fate, sir, which awaits you? As I am in the habit of doing. At least, said Aouda, want should not overtake a man like you. Your friends, I have no friends, madam. Your relatives, I have no longer any relatives. I pity you, then, Mr. Fogg, for solitude is a sad thing, with no heart to which to confide your griefs. They say, though, that misery itself, shared by two sympathetic souls, may be borne with patience. They say so, madam. Mr. Fogg, said Aouda, rising and seizing his hand, do you wish at once a kinswoman and friend? Will you have me as your wife? Mr. Fogg, at this, rose in his turn. There was an unwonted light in his eyes and a slight trembling of his lips. Aouda looked into his face. The sincerity, rectitude, firmness, and sweetness of his soft glance of a noble woman, who could dare all to save him to whom she owed all, at first astonished, then penetrated him. He shut his eyes for an instant, as if to avoid her look. When he opened them again, I love you, he said simply. Yes, by all that is holiest, I love you, and I am entirely yours. Ah, cried Aouda, pressing his hands to her heart. Passepartout was summoned, and appeared immediately. Mr. Fogg still had Aouda's hand in his own. Passepartout understood, and his big round face became as radiant as the tropical sun at its zenith. Mr. Fogg asked him if it was not too late to notify the Reverend Samuel Wilson of Marylebone Parish that evening. Passepartout smiled his most genial smile and said, never too late. It was 5 minutes past 8. Will it be for tomorrow Monday? For tomorrow Monday, said Mr. Fogg, turning to Aouda. Yes, for tomorrow Monday, she replied. Passepartout hurried off as fast as his legs could carry him. Chapter 26, in which Phileas Fogg's name is once more at a premium on change. It is time to relate what a change took place in English common. Goodness, starting again. It is time to relate what a change took place in English public opinion when it transpired that the real bank robber, a certain James Strand, had been arrested on the 17th of December at Edinburgh. 3 days before, Phileas Fogg had been a criminal who was being desperately followed up by the police. Now he was an honorable gentleman, mathematically pursuing his eccentric journey round the world. The papers resumed their discussion about the wager. All those who had laid bets, for or against him, revived their interest as if by magic. The Phileas Fogg bonds again became negotiable, and many new wagers were made. Phileas Fogg's name was once more at a premium on 'Change. His 5 friends of the Reform Club passed these 3 days in a state of feverish suspense. Would Phileas Fogg, whom they had forgotten, reappear before their eyes? Where was he at this moment? The 17th of December, the day of James Strand's arrest, was the 76th since Phileas Fogg's departure, and no news of him had been received. Was he dead? Had he abandoned the efforts, or was he continuing his journey along the route agreed upon? And would he appear on Saturday, the 21st of December, at 9:15 in the evening, on the threshold of the Reform Club saloon? The anxiety in which for 3 days London society existed cannot be described. Telegrams were sent to America and Asia for news of Phileas Fogg. Messengers were dispatched to the house in Savile Row morning and evening. No news. The police were ignorant what had become of the detective, Fix, who had so unfortunately followed up a false scent. Bets increased, nevertheless, in number and value. Phileas Fogg, like a racehorse, was drawing near his last turning point. The bonds were quoted, no longer at 100 below par, but at 20, at 10, and at 5, and paralytic old Lord Albemarle bet even in his favor. A great crowd was collected in Pall Mall and the neighboring streets on Saturday evening. It seemed like a multitude of brokers permanently established round the Reform Club. Circulation was impeded, and everywhere disputes, discussions, and financial transactions were going on. The police had great difficulty in keeping back the crowd, and as the hour when Phileas Fogg was due approached, the excitement rose to its highest pitch. The 5 antagonists of Phileas Fogg had met in the great saloon of the club. John Sullivan and Samuel Fallentin, the bankers, Andrew Stuart, the engineer, Gauthier Ralph, the director of the Bank of England, and Thomas Flanagan, the brewer, one and all waited anxiously. When the clock indicated 20 minutes past 8, Andrew Stuart got up, saying, "Gentlemen, in 20 minutes, and the time agreed upon between Mr. Fogg and ourselves will have expired." "What time did the last train arrive from Liverpool?" asked Thomas Flanagan. "At 23 minutes past 7, replied Gauthier. Ralph. "And the next does not arrive till 10 minutes after 12. "Well, gentlemen," resumed Andrew Stuart, "Phileas Fogg has come in this 7:23 train. He would not have got here by this time. We can therefore regard the he would have got here by this time. We can therefore regard the bet as won." "Wait, don't let us be too hasty," replied Samuel Fallentin. "You know that Mr. Fogg is very eccentric. His punctuality is well known. He never arrives too soon or too late, and I should not be surprised if he appeared before us at the last minute." "Why?" said Andrew Stuart nervously. "If I should see him, I should not believe it was he." "The fact is," resumed Thomas Flanagan, "that Mr. Fogg's project was absurdly foolish. Whatever his punctuality, he could not prevent the delays which were certain to occur, and a delay of only 2 or 3 days would be fatal to his tour. Observe, too," added John Sullivan, that we have received no intelligence from him, though there are telegraphic lines all along his route." "He is lost, gentlemen," said Andrew Stuart. "He has 100 times lost. And you know, besides, that the China, the only steamer he could have taken from New York to get here on time, arrived yesterday. I have seen a list of the passengers, and the name of Phileas Fogg was not among them. Even if we admit that fortune has favored him, he can scarcely have reached America. I think he will be at least 20 days behindhand, and that Lord Albemarle will lose a cool 5,000. "It is clear," replied Gauthier Ralph, "and we have nothing to do but to present Mr. Fogg's check at Bearing tomorrow." At this moment the hands of the club clock pointed to 20 minutes to 9. 5 minutes more," said Andrew Stuart. The 5 gentlemen looked at each other. Their anxiety was becoming intense, but, not wishing to betray it, they readily assented to Mr. Valentin's proposal of a rubber. "I wouldn't give up my 4,000 of the bet," said Andrew Stuart as he took his seat, "for 3,999. The clock indicated 18 minutes to 9. The players took their cards, but could not keep their eyes off the clock. Certainly, however secure they felt, minutes had never seemed so long to them. 17 minutes to 9, said Thomas Flanagan as he cut the cards which Ralph handed to him. Then there was a moment of silence. The great saloon was perfectly quiet, but the murmurs of the crowd outside were heard, with now and then a shrill cry. The pendulum beat the seconds, which each player eagerly counted, and as he listened with mathematical regularity. 16 minutes to 9, said John Sullivan in a voice which betrayed his emotion. 1 minute more, and the wager would be won. Andrew Stuart and his partners suspended their game. They left their cards and counted the seconds. At the 40th second, nothing. At the 50th, still nothing. At the 55th, a loud cry was heard in the street, followed by applause, hurrahs, and some fierce growls. The players rose from their seat. At 57th second, the door of the saloon opened, and the pendulum had not beat the 60th second when Mr. Phileas Fogg appeared, followed by an excited crowd who had forced their way through the club doors, and in his calm voice he said, "Here I am, gentlemen." Chapter 37, in which it is shown that Phileas Fogg gained nothing by his tour round the world unless it were happiness. Yes, Phileas Fogg in prison. The reader will remember that at 5 minutes past 8 in the evening, about 25 hours after the arrival of the travellers in London, Passepartout had been sent by his master to engage the services of the Reverend, in person, not prison, to engage the services of the Reverend Samuel Wilson in a certain marriage ceremony which was to take place the next day. Passepartout went on his errand enchanted. He soon reached the clergyman's house, but found him not at home. Passepartout waited a good 20 minutes, and when he left the reverend gentleman, it was 35 minutes past 8. But in what a state he was! With his hair in disorder, and without his hat, he ran along the street as never man had seen to run before, overturning passers-by, rushing over the sidewalk like a water-spout. In 3 minutes he was in Savile Row again, and staggered breathlessly into Mr. Fogg's room. He could not speak. "What is the matter?" asked Mr. Fogg. "My master," gasped Passepartout. "Marriage impossible." "Impossible? Impossible! For tomorrow." "Why so?" "Because tomorrow is Sunday." "Monday," replied Mr. Fogg. "No, today is Saturday." "Saturday? Impossible." Yes, cried Passepartout. "You have made a mistake of 1 day. We arrived 24 hours ahead of time, but there was only 10 minutes left." But there are only 10 minutes left. Passepartout had seized his master by the collar, and was dragging him along with irresistible force. Phileas Fogg, thus kidnapped, without having time to think, left his house, jumped into a cab, promised £100 to the cabman, and, having run over 2 dogs and overturned 5 carriages, reached the Reform Club. The clock indicated 9:15 when he appeared in the great saloon. Phileas Fogg had accomplished the journey round the world in 80 days. Phileas Fogg had won his wager of £20,000. How was it that a man so exact and fastidious could have made this error of a day? How came he to think that he had arranged in London on Saturday, the 21st day of December, when it was really Friday, the 20th, the 79th day only from his departure? The cause of the error is very simple. Phileas Fogg had, without suspecting it, gained one day on his journey, and this merely because he had travelled constantly eastward. He would, on the contrary, have lost a day had he gone in the opposite direction, that is, westward. In journeying eastward he had gone towards the sun, and the day therefore diminished from him as many times 4 minutes as he crossed degrees in this direction. There are 360 degrees on the circumference of the earth, and these 360 degrees multiplied by 4 minutes gives precisely 24 hours. That is, the day unconsciously gained. In other words, while Phileas Fogg, going eastward, saw the sun pass the meridian 80 times, his friends in London only saw it pass the meridian 79 times. This is why they awaited him at the Reform Club on Saturday, and not Sunday, as Mr. Fogg had thought. And Passepartout's famous family watch, which had always kept London time, would have betrayed this fact if it had been marked the days as well as the hours and minutes. Phileas Fogg, then, had won the £20,000, but he had spent nearly £19,000 on the way. The pecuniary gain was small. His object was, however, to be victorious and not to win money. He divided the £1,000 that remained between Passepartout and the unfortunate Fix, against whom he cherished no grudge. He deducted, however, from Passepartout's share the cost of the gas which had burned in his room for 1920 hours, for the sake of regularity. That evening, Mr. Fogg, as tranquil and phlegmatic as ever, said to Aouda, "Is our marriage still agreeable to you?" "Mr. Fogg," replied she, "it is for me to ask that question. You were ruined, but now you are rich again." "Pardon me, madam, but my fortune belongs to you. If you had not suggested our marriage, my servant would not have gone to the Reverend Samuel Wilson's. I should not have been apprised of my error, and—" "Dear Mr. Fogg," said the young woman. "Dear Aouda," replied Phileas Fogg. It had not been said that the marriage took place 48 hours after, and that Passepartout, glowing and dazzling, gave the bride away. Oh, it need not be said. Had he not saved her, and was he not entitled to this honor? The next day, as soon as it was light, Passepartout rapped vigorously at his master's door. Mr. Fogg opened it and asked, "What's the matter, Passepartout?" "What is it, sir?" "Why, I just this instant found out—" "What?" "That we might have made the tour of the world in only 78 days. "No doubt," returned Mr. Fogg, "by not crossing India. But if I had not crossed India, I should not have saved Aouda. She would not have been my wife," and Mr. Fogg quietly shut the door. Phileas Fogg had won his wager, and had made his journey round the world in 80 days. To do this he had employed every means of conveyance: steamers, railways, carriages, yachts, trading vessels, sledges, elephants. The eccentric gentleman had throughout displayed all his marvellous qualities of coolness and exactitude. But what then? What had he really gained by all this trouble? What had he brought back from this long and weary journey? Nothing, say you? Perhaps so, nothing but a charming woman, who, strange as it may appear, made him the happiest of men. Truly, would you not for less than that make the tour round the world? And we've reached the end of this story time. Don't forget, I do still have a poll. There's one day left. The poll is on Discord and on Twitter for our next All Ages Storytime read. Let's see, it is between Kidnapped by Robert Louis Stevenson, Robin Hood, and King Arthur, both of them by Howard Pyle, and continuing with the Oz series. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the stream here. I am going to take a quick break and then we'll be back for a game stream. I'm thinking of doing some Starbound. So I hope you'll stick around. I will let you know in chat when I'm back. I'll see you in a few. Bye.